Welcome to hashtag 52 Needs. And this week we are talking about growth, specifically at work. And I'm so delighted to have with me Andrew Sidwell, who has spent 35 plus years in creative leadership roles in media and agencies. Andrew is at the forefront of creative media development, starting the first branded podcast in Australia with Ray Martin, participating in a joint media venture in Malaysia, founding a content agencies, and those are just some of his achievements. Andrew is currently the head of content and experience for media tech company Third Space, where he makes use of his wide-ranging skills. When his eldest daughter was born, Andrew realized how he actively contributed to misogyny, sexism, homo, and transphobia, and he shifted from realizing that he was part of the problem to becoming one who helps fix it. A few years ago, he started the blog Dear Men of Tomorrow and recently joined an industry group aiming to eradicate benevolent and hostile sexism from the workplace. Hello, back again. From life to work.
Is a separation. Why are we separating the two?
Because this is for LinkedIn and the other one goes on Facebook. And then
no, I just meant in general, life and work.
Oh, right. There you go. In general. Hey, my point exactly. Yep. When people talk to me and they say, I want to develop at work, and I go, yeah, but I don't separate you out. You're a whole person. You take yourself to work.
100%. Right? And that's the look. And, you know, you talked about the industry, the initiative that we're trying to, you know, equality at work and men actually coming to the table and talking and trying to change it. And that's the thing about, you know, you got a lot of these male leaders who are, you know, speaking the right DEI, you know, compliance and understanding all that, but at home, it's not living it. So you kind of can't walk the walk. Like if you're not walking it at home, it's very hard to work in the workplace. So 100% those two are linked, you know, because you can smell that fakeness anywhere.
I love it when I work with people and they're like, you know, they're harsh and they are, you know, like really they still operate on that parent-child, critical parent-child, where the child needs to obey, and I go. And I point things out and they go, yeah, but you should know me. I'm a real teddy bear, you know, and I'm real soft and you should know me at home. I'm a totally different person. And I go, so how's that working for you? You know?
Transactional analysis.
Yeah.
I'm normally, when I'm in my other office, I lean behind and get my TA Today book. Talk about the
people play. Yes.
Yep, totally. The lies we tell ourselves.
Yes.
Hilarious.
Yeah. So when we talk about growth at work, people often think it's just skills, but it's actually far more than that, isn't it?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I look at I started as a 15-year-old in the workplace in the 80s, and I look at the attitudes that have grown around me that I've had to grow with, sometimes ahead, sometimes behind, catch up as well. And so I'm thinking about my first job and as office boy, and we had a very traditional, it was a radio station, but it was a very family run radio station. So it wasn't like, you know, rock and roll media. Mm-hmm. And the GM, the MD, the managing director, I remember sending out, I had to photocopy the memos, the old inter-office memos. And there was one that he sent out that he told all female staff they couldn't wear pants to work. This was like 86, I think it was. Yeah, 86. And I remember one of the executive assistants, like, she was just up in arms about it. And so I think about those attitudes and I think about like growth at work since then. Imagine sending that out today, how far we've come. And then in other areas, how far we haven't kind of come. But yeah, you know, the skills is just one dimension. Growing your capability is one. But then, you know, we look at, I follow a whole bunch of interesting people on LinkedIn who are in the neurodivergent spaces, and they've just found their voice and they're only in their 20s. And so understanding that now in the workplace and the growth of, the awareness of what was determined professional was pretty much the patriarchal definition that everyone was forced to follow. And now it's been challenged. So, you know, watching these people struggle in, you know, probably older and more rigid, and, you know, benefited from their privilege, and benefited from the patriarchal system that, you know, was life that we were born into, really struggle with the workplace changing now, and, you know, people demanding to be allowed to bring their whole selves to work, or to be seen who they are, and not to be managed by a one-dimensional view of the world of, like, especially, I mean, I'm I'm ADHD. My daughter's ADHD. My eldest is the old Asperger's, ASD1. So parenting HUDs with an ASD1, all of a sudden you become, that affects you in the workplace. All of a sudden you start to see the people who have got fallen through the cracks, and you can see clearly. There was a guy I worked with at Austereo early on when I came to Sydney, and then I left, and in the time I'd left, my daughter had a diagnosis, and then I worked with that person again later on. I was like, oh my God, I missed it. I completely and the thing that you learn about kids on the spectrum is that they have a friend who decodes the world for them. And then they also have, in the same kind of friend group, and almost an alpha who senses there's something different and then picks on it, right? So same, like when I work with this person again, I was like, oh my God, they're displaying all the traits of this. And so instead of decoding the world for them, I decoded them for our colleagues. That makes sense. And then it did work. It really, having picked up those kind of skills in those years, you kind of, and then you see the person and not the annoyance. And like originally that person, I was butting heads with them at Austereo, and then I really find them like so endearing because I've grown in my understanding of neurodivergency. And then so I can see them, and then, or the traits that may manifest that are similar, and speak to them. And it just makes life so much richer, because you're getting all the kind of bullshit hostility. So yeah, I think anyone can learn new skills, but it's this stuff that, whether you label it the soft skills or whatever, I don't think it is. I think,
skills.
Yeah. Yep.
Skills.
Yep. 100%. And understanding the tapestry and the diversity of humans, and then going, and I remember when I got my first kind of big job at Austereo, and it was the first time I ever got a job description with competencies in it. And in it, it was like, uses a raft of techniques to get the outcomes that they need. And I was like, I think when I first got that, I didn't really understand it because I hadn't progressed on that journey. And then when I kind of, a few years later, I always look back at that and go, yeah, that is the essence of the workplace, is that you've got to develop this wide kind of toolkit to understand the different people that you're working with and the kind of common goal that you're working on, to, not just be a blunt weapon that level 1 leadership in that book, The 5 Levels, Richard C. Maxwell's book of 5 levels of leadership. Level 1 is like, uses their title to demand the outcomes. And so by using those techniques, and then so if you're going to use a raft of techniques, then you've got to be developing a raft of techniques, right? And understand it. And it's the essence of it. And I hear people say, like, why should I be the bigger person? And it's just like, well, that's the fundamental of, someone's got to make that decision. And, if you do it, like, if you, I don't know, I mean, that always gets me, that thought of, if you're having that thought, then you have a consciousness and awareness around the different, the kind of path forward. And I was like, well, you've said it, so you got to do it. You're aware of it. They're not aware of it. So you've got to choose it. And then that's how you do it, is you develop these tools to kind of go, I'm not looking for what I call the red mist, which I've been such a victim of, the red mist, so, like, where I just got to win this argument, right? And the thing for me that I always have battled with in the skills outside the skills to do my job when I was a copywriter, where I had to be able to write persuasive copy to get people to do the things that they probably didn't necessarily want to do, a bunch of them to do the thing, right? To be interested in this thing that they weren't necessarily aware that they were interested in. Now, those skill sets, when you're interacting with people, and in a almost, not necessarily an argumentative way, but those aren't great. It isn't like, you're not trying to win that conversation, right? You're not trying to win. Whereas when you're a copywriter, you have to win. You have to win the battle of their attention. right?
But you'll be able to differentiate between being a copywriter and being Andrew Sidwell, right?
Yeah, 100%. And that is, that's taken years to, and I still get it wrong. But again, the reasons I get it wrong is because I'm not present, because I drift off into, I need to win this, or like everything gets back to, how do I stay more present in this moment? And then, and whether it's Goal and his emotional intelligence book and talking about the circuit breaker of, not the distance, it's what's his face, the Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. So like the distance between the stimulus and the response is where true freedom resides. That is just speaking about being present in this moment and not being hijacked.
And now I would like to add something. You have read many, many books, and I know a lot of people who have read books. And for example, when I talk about emotional intelligence, they go, oh yeah, Daniel Goleman, I read that book many years ago. And I go, yeah, but when I look at your behavior, you haven't really changed. So growth is not reading books. I just want to be really clear on that. It's about really making changes, active changes in your life, and taking the steps to get through that cognitive dissonance of, oh no, beautiful weather today, isn't it? And just going back to the old and going, yeah, I've read the book and that's it. Or actually saying, you know what, I'm just going to stretch myself here and I'm going to be vulnerable. And especially when people are in leadership positions, that takes guts.
Yep.
And this is why I love working with younger people, because there is no longer this whole thing about, I have to be the role model and I have to be perfect and and therefore I can leadership one, I can tell you what to do. And you are just you're just my puppet, versus the younger generation who comes into a job and says, no, I'm not going to stay here if you're not supporting me in my personal growth. Professional growth, yes. Personal growth on top of that.
Yeah, right.
I'm very aware of the fact that sometimes people flip it and go, and I've worked with people, it's my employer's job to actually provide this kind of growth. And I go, no.
No. That changed though. Like that's the change I reckon I've seen in the last 10 years, is where it was, and I know that when I was setting up Suddenly, it was like, it's not the company's responsibility to develop you, it's for you to figure out your plan, and the company will back your plan and support you, and it's that, that, and I mean, again, that's the world that they may have been presented as what employment looks like, is this stereotyped, the company invests in you, blah, blah, blah. It's like, well, no, that world has definitely changed. But back to the book reading stuff, it's like, it's easy to, like, you can tell when someone's just intellectualized something, but don't live it. And again, like for me, this year is about walking the walk. Like, how am I walking the walk? I've got to just walk the walk and make sure that, what I believe in, I'm living and I'm true. And so for me, reading's always been about, what I said in the other chat that we've had is lessons hide everywhere, right? And it's kind of like, and novels and business books. Novels are great. I found novels great for me as a man, reading female narratives, authors, female characters, right? It's the closest time as a man you will ever be inside the head, truly, and understand it from a kind of empathy point of view, because it's written by women and it's a female character, and you go, oh my God, okay. And it just, I've read so many novels, and so many ones set in Pakistan and India. Like, Indian novels are my most favorite novels to read. Indian female, Jhumpa Lahiri and, Kiran Desai. But, the business ones are really, you read a chapter and something speaks to you so deeply, you don't have to finish that book, or you come back to it later. You just put it down and then you start to play with it and turn it over in your head and go, how does that apply? Yeah. And I guess, and, from the jobs that I've done, and I'm like being media side, where you're in a creative position where the brief comes in through many other hands and you're not necessarily in front of the client. But when you're an agency side in front of the client, you get to influence all of their decisions, their strategy and their direction. And that's where, like, I noticed where what I was reading, I could actually put it into practice straight away, and then like recommend it to a client because it made sense. And it might be out of a book, but it's out of a book from someone who's done it. Yeah. And actually, lived it. So yeah, the books,
it's about putting it into action.
Totally.
Right? And this is the thing, is I always say, the brain learns by repetition. Once is accident, twice is coincidence, 3 times is the beginning of a pattern. The more often you do something, the better you learn it. Yes, you can turn it into a habit that doesn't work so well for you, but you can also turn it in a habit that does. And a lot of people now go, I want instant fixes. I've read the book. I've done the 5 videos that go with it, or, you know, the mini short course that I've done. I can get my qualification by doing a 3-day course, and I'm done. And I'm going, yeah, but apprenticeships used to be and still are 1, 2, 3 years long. Once is accident, twice coincidence, 3 times beginning of a pattern. You staying in a job for half a year and demanding that you're going to be promoted does not mean that you have the knowledge to be able to do that, because you may have the, again, as you said, the cognitive awareness of what it takes. And I'll bet you lots of money for that. Most people are not even aware of half of the things that are involved in the role, but because they've read the right books and they've done all the right things, they've ticked the right boxes, connected with the right people, they think they can do the job. I generally say to people, do not make any changes in your job for at least a year.
Yeah.
And ideally 2, especially when you're younger, when you're still building the foundation.
Yep. Yeah. I 100% agree. You see it time and time again. You kind of I had someone replace me in a job that I had, and instantaneously they were just making all these changes, and I was thinking, yeah, well, good luck with that. Because again, it's pretty easy to spot what you think is wrong, but to understand the whole circumstance, right? The whole kind of situation and how everything kind of works as well. I mean, look, and I remember being that guy, always wanting to be ahead of where I was at, believing that, I should be promoted, I should be all those kind of things. It was just part of that was youth, part of that was the excitement, part of it was my emotional maturity then as well. So like,
yes,
whatever kind of works for you, and you cause no harm to your kind of colleagues, and you as long as you're just kind of willing to kind of take the lesson when it appears. And I thinking specifically about when I got a warning when I was in my early 20s. I got a warning. I was a copywriter at Fox in Melbourne, and I was living with my girlfriend at the time, was one of the sales coordinators, and I got called up to the sales director's office because that's what Crave answered to, and I was thinking I was going to get a pay rise. Right, this is how deluded my ego was, because I was like, just bringing heaps of attention to myself for all the right reasons and also all the wrong reasons. And I remember being summoned up to his office, but before I got there, this guy who was one of the agency executives or managers called me, and I had a really good relationship with him, and he was really good friends with the sales boss, my boss, and he was just had a little chat to me. And then I went in and I got a warning, and then I came out and the guy grabbed me again, and he pulled me aside and just gave me, like, he said to me, hey, look, this is what's going on. You're putting your hand up in the air and you're drawing all this attention to yourself. He said, stick it in your pocket. Just stick it in your pocket, and be known for the kind of good stuff, and just don't look at me. And I remember going home, and it was good advice. It was really good advice. Because I'm still repeating it now 30 odd years later, but I remember going in the car home with my girlfriend at the time and just like ranting about the boss and how we got it all wrong and all this kind of stuff. And she was quiet, and I was like, and I worked with her. I was like, oh, she thinks he's right. And I deserved it. And I just remember going, oh my God. And I just went home, and it was like 6:30 or something. And I just got into bed in the fetal position and just slept. And then woke up in the next day, and then just took that one piece of advice that I got from that guy and knew I had to apply it. And then, that was, and I fucked up heaps after that, but not as badly as that. So it is, even in those moments of deluded ego, high ego, or whatever. And a friend of mine who I used to work, who got me to Malaysia, Keith, and he'd always talk about there's 2 metrics in a workplace, and it's bullshit and talent, in a radio. And when the talent outweighs the bullshit, it's time to go. Right? Sorry, when the bullshit outweighs the talent, the other way. When the bullshit outweighs the talent, it's time to go. And I always had that in my head going, oh my God, am I full? Is there too much shit? And so it's as simple as having just something like that as a little metric. You might not be fully aware of all of this, the workplace and emotional intelligence, but you know, if your parents have raised you right, good is good and bad is bad. And you know what, if you're being a dick, and you do, and you might not be ready to admit it to yourself, but you're ready to probably pull yourself back from the edge. And, that's as long as you've kind of got that, then you've got something that you can work with and you can just grow from there as well. So yeah, I guess listen to, again, it's your higher self. Listen to the messages, your wiser self. If you want to, don't worry about height, deeper, coming from your kind of, your calm abiding, your deep wisdom is sending you, hey, knock it off here, you're being a dickhead.
In order to do that, it's really important to have that, what they call the growth mindset. Because if you're coming from that place of I'm good enough, and this is again, I'm good enough, I don't need to change, versus I'm good enough right now. And you let go of that hubris, that kind of, the attitude of, I've got this sorted. And I meet people like that all the time. Because I mean, sometimes I got put into positions where people don't really want to work with a coach. They think they don't need it.
Yep.
And that sometimes can get very interesting. But it's this whole, as you said, it's like we reach a certain place where we need to change. And often growth happens when pain outweighs hidden gain. As long as we have this whole sense, I'm getting something back, even though it hurts on some level, but there is something I'm getting out of it. And as long as that gain outweighs the pain, we're not changing. But when the pain becomes too great, when the cost for a relationship, for job, for anything, health, whatever it might be, outweigh that, that's when we shift into this preparation mode. And when somebody comes along and says something at that point, hey, that's not working, that's when you curl up in the fetal position and go, okay, I'm going to make a change here. Because on some level, you would have noticed that something wasn't quite right. You did not go into that. You might have expected a raise, but you knew that on some level that was not going to happen, because otherwise it would not have affected you that much, would be my guess. Yeah,
you're so right. Like you're, and again, it's the layers of honesty with yourself. Like as you start to listen to that voice more and more, you know when you're walking into a room that you're about to cop a tweet for something that you've done and that you shouldn't have done, but you did, and you didn't catch it in time. But early on, it is there on a level, and then it's about your willingness to be honest with yourself that you've done this and you deserve it. And look, that's the same with therapy, right? Like the first time I went to therapy, and I reckon I got so much out of therapy because I was like, I turned up going, okay, unfounded jealousy is killing my relationship. And I turned up with that attitude of going, this is where it's all going wrong for me, help me. And, and again, it's an internal, not an I have to go here because my wife said I have to come here. No, that's not the reason. So, I mean, the Carol Dweck growth mindset stuff, I don't know, when you're saying it, like, I don't think people intentionally go, I don't want to have a growth mindset. It's just like for whatever circumstances and survival mode. Survivals are really like, if you're seeing your company laying off, or your industry's laying off thousands of people, and you don't necessarily have the tool set to be able to handle that, right? And so some of the fixed, rigid things you grasp on is the opposite of a growth mindset. It's very hard to be like, I've got a family to feed, I've got like school fees to pay, I've got this salary, I've got to keep this money coming in. So it's very hard to be expansive and open and go, whatever. It's, yes, I guess, it's, I wouldn't know the advice I've been through that myself in the last probably year and a half, and I know the version of myself from my last in the agency that I'd helped co-found. That was the worst version of me professionally, because I was in survival mode and I knew it wasn't working. And I knew that both of us, the two founders, hadn't really founded a business before. We'd run teams, and I just didn't have the skill set to keep it and make it work. And so the worst kind of a version of myself appeared. And so I've probably spent a year and a half going, how do I make sure that never appears again? And that is about, well, what led me to be in that situation? Is it about, I want to redo that and run an agency again and, prove myself I've learned, prove myself wrong that I can learn? Or is it just, no, that was the thing I tried and like, it's not for me. I have no desire to do it. So
You did a
yeah,
year and a half. You pulled the plug. How
yeah,
many people stay in the same job, in the same misery, in the same kind of, this is just how the world works, or this is how it is, for many, many years?
yeah.
And
I didn't know. So I spent a year and a half after leaving there, looking back at it, right? And so I did 3.5 years. But the first probably year and a half was, and the reality was I was made redundant, or my role was made redundant, and it, quite rightly so. And it was, there was a whole bunch of other roles across the business, but I now look at it and go, it was a good decision to move me on as a part of it. But also, it wasn't the kind of person that I'm portraying myself here. I wasn't that person in that role. It
yeah,
was to begin with. And then, it's that survival mode of just thinking, just all the shit things that you do that you think, again, they're probably unconscious, just like, but almost barking orders, all that stuff that we spoke about.
but you had your 3.5 years. You had your once as accident, twice coincidence, 3 times beginning of the pattern. And then, sometimes the universe gives us a little kick, and it activates
Totally did.
around us to say, here
Yep.
you go.
Yep. Yeah, 100%. And the lessons that when you look back at in the year and a half, you look back and you go, the biggest lesson for me was I was operating out of fear. I was operating out of survival, going, I've got to, I've got kids at high school, and whatever, I need this job.
Yeah.
And then when the redundancy was coming, and I knew it was coming down the line, a mate of mine said to me, our good friend Nico, said to me, well, first thing, you got any options? And I went, yeah, I've got two. And he said, you got heaps more than that. You just don't know it yet.
Yeah.
And that was the best piece of advice and then once I kind of settle back into that, there were other options that appeared I had no idea that I had, and kind of came out of the woodwork. And so I wouldn't have. Now one of the things was like if those red flags that I saw probably maybe year one, even earlier, I would just, I wouldn't want to be in that situation again. I believe that there's work out there, that my family can be fed, that we can have the roof over our heads. I just wouldn't stay in there fighting for something that fundamentally isn't going to get better.
Yeah. Well, good place to stop, because what you basically said, growth happens no matter what. But you can either resist it, you can embrace it, you can go along with it and just, go with the flow, and, or you can really actively be a participant.
Can I share like one last growth story, right? So, and just because I recently put up a plaque on Facebook of, I was co-host of Nights at Fox in Melbourne in 93, and we did like a 21% share, which is just crazy at the time. But before that, I was full-time on air. So I was writing as well as like doing gossip and stuff. And so I'd gone there to be full-time on air in 92. I was 22 years of age. And we'd been given 6 months to get the show to number one, and I got it to number one. And then they took me off air and in the summer break and said they were going classic rock. I sounded too young. And then they were just trying to give me all this other work, these jobs, and I was fighting it and was really resistant. And I remember this voice in my head is just like, okay, just stop fighting and just see where it takes you. And I was like 22, and I'd never had that kind of thought. Like, and it was this, I always been kind of taught to fight for my career and fight, and try and get what you have to get what you want. And I genuinely had that thought. I was just like, and I had this metaphor of, I'm just going to be like in a river and just let it, like you saying, flows. Before Csikszentmihalyi's book, and I just went with it, and it ended up in really curious places. It wasn't like a happy ending after all, but it obviously led me on a path to here. And it came over me. It was like, I've got to stop pushing against it. I've just got to see where the current takes me.
Yeah.
And it was this probably one, and again, it's your higher self sitting there. Now I look back and go, oh my God, that's my higher self just sending me in a fully diluted ego state, and just heard that. And it took me in incredible places and worked on really interesting things that I wasn't open to beforehand. So yeah, stop fighting and just see where it takes you.
So when I said that going with the flow, with a kind of, it is the be an active participant in the sense that you will still have a paddle in your boat. If you feel that you're drifting towards the banks, you can bring yourself back into flow.
Yeah.
And that's the recognition, that's the active participation. It doesn't mean that you paddle upstream.
No, you're not, or you're not a helpless victim of it.
You can do that too. But that's my friend Della Duncan, who's got the Upstream podcast, which is all about challenging the current paradigm. If you're interested, please have a look into that. Really, really interesting stuff. But it's about really just being present. Now, before we finish, I just wanted to say, first of all, thank you very much. But I also wanted to say thank you to everybody who's gone on the journey with me, because this is the final 52 #52needs podcast. We finished. This is it. This is the 52nd one. And I wanted to finish on growth because this is what it was. It's been a huge growth journey for me. I mean, if I listen to the first ones that I did, I go, okay. And I feel like I'm just starting to learn. And it's been an absolutely amazing journey. I have had the most amazing conversations with people. And I'm really, really grateful that I get to finish this with you, because again, when I think of growth, the name Andrew Sidwell comes to mind immediately. So
I'm so honored. Thank you so much. I had no idea I was the part of the last one. So now I'm going to have to go and binge the other 51.
Thank you. And thanks everybody for watching and listening. And I'll see you for #52boundaries next.